I got to hit record over here. You know, there's a lot of buttons to take care of in a podcast, especially when you're flying solo. But that's all right. We going to make it happen, y'all. Going live. And I will say this, Mike, that this has got to be the best part of the day. Impacting Life 24/7 with your host and co-host, CL King and Mike Black. We're so delighted that everybody is taking time out of their busy schedule to join us on this Thursday night edition, an early edition, I might tell you, of Impacting Life 24/7. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good. So,
yeah, I am so glad that you decided to get out of hibernation and come back and join me on the show, brother.
That's right. Glad to do it.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I really appreciate about having a co-host is that I don't have to do all the talking all the time. I'm still working on Mike because sometimes he don't like to say much. But Mike, the floor is yours tonight, brother, because we got a great guest. And you know, you and I talked about, you know, imagine back when we were 17. Can you remember when you were 17, Mike?
I can remember. Yes, I can.
It was a long time ago, though, right?
Yeah, very long time ago.
Well, just imagine, ladies and gentlemen, being 17 years old and standing on the very threshold of your life, getting ready to unfold. I mean, I went in the Marine Corps at 18. When did you go in the Marine Corps, Mike?
18 as well.
18, and he had a whole lot more hair when he was 18. So I went into the Marine Corps, you know, 17, 18 years old. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, an intersection like that where you've got the whole world at your disposal, the promise, the future, and it's stripped away from you without it being your fault. It's one thing when I mess up something. It's another thing when it's taken from me and it wasn't my fault. Our guest tonight, Jeffrey Deskovic, Esquire, is an internationally recognized expert on wrongful convictions. And he is the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which has freed 11 wrongfully convicted people and helped pass multiple laws. Jeff is also on the advisory board and one of the members of the coalition group, It Could Happen to You. He sits on a global advisory council of Restorative Justice International. You know, he holds some very, very lofty titles and he's doing some tremendous work. But one of the things that kind of drew me and magnetized me towards Jeff was that not only was Jeff working a foundation, but the foundation was in his name. And then when I found out why the foundation was in his name, I found out that at 17, not 27, not 37, ladies and gentlemen, 17 years old. Mike, he was 17 when his life changed forever. Jeff was wrongfully convicted of a rape and murder that sent him in prison, and all the evidence was turned against him. He had to fight, scratch, and claw to get the evidence revealed that he was not the perpetrator. And so the Deskovic Foundation was formed out of that type of adversity. I want you guys to listen very closely. I'm asking everyone to share this tonight because we know there are people like that that are sitting in prison now that very well may be innocent. I would like for you to welcome to our show, Impacting Life 24/7, the Honorable, the none other, my friend up north, Jeff Deskovic, Esquire. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here tonight. This is going to be a great one. I love the vibe of everybody.
Yes, sir. We always keep it live, Jeff. We got the energy, baby. We put the throttle down. Are you feeling me, Jeff? You're on mute. Take your thing.
Oh, yeah, completely. Yes, I'm 100% feeling you. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Well, Mike, thank you for joining us again. Mike, all the way there in, where are you hailing from, Mike?
New Bern, North Carolina, new town. Yes, sir.
And Mike just bought a new ranch out there, a new big old massive house. So Mike's living the dream. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight, Mike. And Jeff, our guest, our virtual guest here in the studios of Impacting Life 24/7. You have a tremendous story. You're doing some tremendous work. But before we get to all of that, Jeff, we kind of like to deal with two housekeeping things up first. Number one, we want to ask how people can find you, how they can get up with you. And then number two, we're going to ask just for you to tell just a little bit about yourself without telling it all, because we're going to do that throughout the show. So Jeff, how can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, they can definitely find me on my website, www.deskovic.org. I also have a public figure page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn, so people can message me that way.
Okay, so very good. And we're putting those links in the live chat because, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, on Impacting Life 24/7, which is heard in 33 states, 20 countries, and on 20 different platforms, we send this out all over the world. But for our live folks, we give them the links live. So Greg takes care of getting the websites and links in. And then we also put your links, Jeff, in the show notes. So all of that will be out, and we want people from all across the world to connect with you and help make this foundation globally known, because it needs to be known. And so, Jeff, if you would, tell us just a little bit about yourself. Without telling it all, I want to we got to savor it, brother. It's a fast night, so we got a lot to cover. But just give us a little bit of background. Introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. So I founded the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. You mentioned our mission. We also have a strong secondary interest in other justice reform topics. And I am an attorney. I have a master's degree as well. My master's thesis is on wrongful conviction causes and reform. And my mission in life is to free wrongfully convicted people, work to prevent that from happening to other people, as well as broader justice reform issues.
Wow.
I'll say this, maybe I'm a quasi-public figure, so I do a lot of traditional media and new media interviews. I regularly meet with elected officials in New York, Pennsylvania, California. And as an individual advocate, not to be confused with my capacity in the various nonprofit entities that we've mentioned, my endorsement's been sought and given in 11 different political races where wrongful conviction and broader justice reform was part of the plank for political candidates running for office. So I feel honored, and my work is recognized, is what it amounts to.
Well, and I wholeheartedly see that and support it. And on this show, Mike, we toot our own horns, don't we, brother?
Yes, sir.
That's important.
Yes,
that's why we brought you on. Sometimes people come on and they're humble and they don't want to say anything, but that's why you came on this podcast with our global reach from literally the balances around the galaxy. I know, around the world. We want people to know about what's going on. And this is a place that is designed for that, because there could be someone listening who has a family member, Jeff, that would need your services. Mike, you think back to 17, when you were 17, what was your mindset back when you were 17, Mike?
Man, my mindset was what I'm going to do next. I mean, the next day I was just not thinking about the future.
Right.
I know I got out of high school when I was 17, decided to join the Marine Corps with my buddy, but for the summer, still trying to figure it out. And my parents are like, "Hey, what are you going to do?" I'm like, "I'm going to join the military." And they're like, "Okay."
Yeah. So at 17 years old, you're making all these plans. Well, Jeff, your 17-year-old life took a dramatic shift, and we're going to get to that. Our break comes up at 8:15, so I know we got a lot to cover. But Jeff, at 17, what was your mindset, and what were you looking at for the future for your life? What were you wanting to do, Jeff?
Sure. So, I wanted to be an attorney when I grew up. So that was what was on my mind.
Mm-hmm. But I'm saying in school and high school. You were at high school at the time when this whole thing went down.
Well, I was 16 when the time everything happened, and then the outcome that we're going to unfold happened when I was at 17. So there was a span of a year between the initial incident we're going to get into, and then when things just went from there even further.
So, and that's definitely going to be some illumination for our audience tonight. But I'm saying, were you playing sports? Were you chasing
All right,
girls?
So I kind of lived a double life. I mean, in school I was quiet to myself. I didn't participate in a lot of organized sports. So you might say I was kind of on the fringes of the society there, but I lived a totally different life outside of that. I lived in an apartment complex in Peekskill. It was middle class, ethnically diverse, and I was one of the main kids out of a whole lot of us. And kind of whatever I would suggest would be what we would do. If we're going to play basketball, if we're going to ride bikes, we're going to go play Monopoly, we're going to go to the movies, we're going to play video games. Whatever I would suggest would usually be what we would end up doing. So I guess in some ways, outside of school, I guess you might say I was kind of an all-American kid.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is that you were, and I'm trying to paint this picture for our audience to understand. Again, I'm joined and with my co-host Mike Black. I'm joined with the founder of the Deskovic Foundation, Jeff Deskovic Esquire, and he's up there in the northern part of the world. Where are you at exactly, Jeff? Again?
Yeah, I'm in the Bronx. I'm in the Bronx, which is one of the boroughs in New York City, in New York.
Yes, in the Bronx. And so we're just painting the picture and trying to illuminate this for our listening audience that Jeff was a normal kid, but he was taking life by the horns. He had a circle of influence, and life was going great. But I want you to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that in an instant, that's the unique thing about the show. We talk about impact, and impact can happen in an instant. It can happen instantaneously, and you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and your life radically change. Mike, have you heard that before? Being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Definitely, I've heard that, and what a tragedy for a lot of people. Yourself, obviously, Mr. Jeff, to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and go through what you went through. I'm excited to hear more details about it.
So when we come back from our break, we're going to hear exactly what happened to Jeff. And he's, again, an attorney. He is the founder of the Deskovic Foundation. He's my friend now up there in the Bronx. And so when we come back from our break with our sponsors, we're going to hear about exactly what happened with Jeff that actually turned his life upside down. But before we do that, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. Our amazing sponsors are truly the engines that help Impacting Life 24/7 produce phenomenal results in 33 states and 17 countries around the world. Our gold sponsors, Michelle Perry. She is the host of the Successful Diligence podcast and the best-selling author of The Pebble in My Shoe. You've got to get a copy of her book today. Connect with Michelle and get this dynamic book in your possession at successfuldiligence.com. Paula Cousson has dedicated her life volunteering in community youth programs such as the Young Marines. Paula believes that the greatest asset each young person has is an individual caring adult in their life. Our platinum sponsors, Mr. Gregory Smith, who is also the VP of the CL King Group and the executive producer of Impacting Life 24/7. He is the author of 100 Simple Ways How to Manage a Property and Evidence Room. Get your copy of his book today by reaching out to Gregory Smith on Facebook or email him at smithg1963@yahoo.com. Adrienne Barker. She is the host of the Adrienne Barker Speaks podcast, a life coach and CEO of Professional Global Etiquette. Connect with Adrienne Barker today at professionalglobaletiquette.com. If you would like to be a sponsor of our international podcast, which reaches states in the U.S. and countries around the world, it's very simple. Go to clkingspeaker.com and sign up to partner with us today as we continue to impact one life, one day at a time. Impacting one life, one day at a time. That's right. This is Impacting Life 24/7 with your host, CL King. Thank you to our amazing sponsors who really help fuel the mission of what we're doing. And we are joined. This is another example of our mission, a repository. Imagine having someone of this caliber in a place where you can contact them. I have our good friend, Jeff Deskovic, Esquire. He is the founder of the Deskovic Foundation, which deals in overturning wrongful convictions. And so Jeff he's not only the founder and leader of this foundation, but he's also someone that's got some skin in the game. So tell us, Jeff, what went down, brother?
Sure. So at 16 years old, I was arrested for the murder and rape of a classmate in high school, which I was falsely accused. So I knew her name. She knew mine. She was in two of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. That was really the extent of it. We were not even really on a high-buy basis. I got on the police radar because some of the kids in the school told the police that they might want to speak to me, because remember, in school, I was more quiet and to myself. And I guess the underlying theory is that people who are quiet and to themselves commit heinous crimes. Mm-hmm. Now, another aspect of it is I was a sensitive teenager, and this was really my first brush with death. And the police interpreted my being emotional, being sentimental, as some sort of outward sign, like I was sorry for what I had done. Mm. Lastly, the Peekskill police got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which purported to have the actual the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator, and I had the misfortune of matching that. So a couple of the things to understand about my background, which will make the story make more sense, which is that I came from a single-parent household. My father was never involved in my life in any aspect, and that would intersect with the good cop, bad cop technique, in which one officer pretended to be my friend, whereas the other pretended to be more aggressive. So I began to look up to the officer pretending to be my friend as a father figure. Mm-hmm. Another aspect is, before I was a teenager, the career that I fantasized about having when I grew up was to actually be a cop. And so over the 6 weeks, my interactions with the police took on the following dynamic: that half the time they would talk to me as a suspect, and then when they would push too hard, I'd become frightened and want to get away from them. Jeff is this junior detective helper theme was what they threw at me. They would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Hey, let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. So they made me feel important. And they would ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinions were correct. Okay. Eventually, they got me to agree to take a polygraph test by telling me, hey, we got some new information in the file. We want to share that with you. You'll be able to be even more helpful to us. But first, you have to take and pass a polygraph. So the next day, rather than reporting to the high school, I went to the police station for this test. And because it was a school day, my mother and grandmother did not call around looking for me. They thought that I was in school. And instead of doing the test at the Peekskill police station, the police brought me by car 40 minutes away from Peekskill in Westchester County. They brought me to the town of Brewster in Putnam County, which meant I was totally dependent upon the police. I had no independent way of leaving. I had no attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat the entire time that I was there. They gave me a 4-page brochure, which explained how the polygraph worked, but I didn't understand it because it had a lot of big words in it. But then I figured, well, I'm there to help the police, so what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. From there, they put me in a small room. The polygraphist, by the way, was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian and he was pretending not to be a police officer. So he never revealed his status as law enforcement. He never read me my rights. So in this small room, he gave me countless cups of coffee in order to get me nervous. And from there, he attached me to this polygraph machine. And then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he raised his voice at me. He invaded my personal space. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And as each hour passed, my fear increased in proportion to the time. Towards the end of the interrogation, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test results that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And when he said that to me, that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and said, "Look, these other officers are going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do this any longer. You have to help yourself. Listen, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested." Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term. I was only concerned with my safety in the moment. The fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else knew where I was either loomed very large in my mind. I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. And remember, they had interrogated me 6.5 to 7 hours nonstop. So the last thing is this: there was a possibility of harm thrown on one hand. There was this false promise on the other. And so it all culminated into my making up a story based on the information they had given me that day and in the 6 weeks run up to that moment. By the time it was all said and done, I collapsed onto the floor into a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Needless to say, I was arrested. I was charged with a murder and rape.
Oh my, Mike.
I can't imagine what you were, being that young and having to process all that, and those kind of tactics, man. Hopefully the laws changed since then. I mean, you were 17, man. That's
Yeah,
a
I was.
lot. That's a lot.
I was 16 at that point, but I would turn 17 before the trial started, which
Okay,
I
16.
would lose.
Wow.
And I guess
Wow.
that's a great segue to come into the next part of the story, because
Wow.
before the DNA test, before the trial started, results of a DNA test came in from the FBI lab, which showed that semen found in the victim did not match me. But instead of
Okay.
acknowledging they made a mistake, they continued to prosecute full speed ahead. So the prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud. So when they do an autopsy, written and audio notes happen at the same time. So it was only 6 months later, after doing that autopsy, only once the DNA didn't match me, suddenly he claimed that he remembered that he forgot to document medical evidence that he said showed the victim had been promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue, well, it doesn't matter that the semen didn't come from me. That just meant she had slept with yet another person before I had murdered and raped her. Taking it a step further, he named another youth by name that he claimed had slept with the victim, but he never set the proper evidentiary foundation for that. He never called this other youth as a witness. He never asked him for the DNA sample. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. So they were able to get away with that because the victim's family was not coming to court. So they had no idea of what was being said about her in the courtroom. And then on my attorney's side of it, he basically didn't defend me. He never called my alibi as a witness. I was actually playing wiffle ball with a friend when the crime happened. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that proved that the confession was coerced and false. He literally asked no questions at all whatsoever of the medical examiner. He rarely met with me. When the prosecutor didn't ask the other for a DNA sample or call the other youth as a witness that he was claiming had slept with the victim, my lawyer was supposed to make that move to do that, but we couldn't because of a conflict of interest. So this other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that same public defender's office, and specifically by the lawyer who was supposed to be supervising him on my case. So that prevented the defense from asking him to give a sample, call him as a witness.
Jeff,
And
this is an absolute cluster. In the Marine Corps,
Yes.
we have another word that would go with that word, cluster.
Yeah, sure. I think we all understand what that would be.
This is an absolute cluster. Let me just back up real quick, okay? Because you said that they took you on a school day, so nobody knew that you were missing. So you didn't have your parents there. You didn't have a lawyer there. You didn't have anyone there, and so they kept you under the banner of under the cover of a school day to interrogate you, work you up to get you ready to take this polygraph, huh?
Yes, you have it exactly right.
Wow.
And Jeff, it seems to me that they were trying to just pin it on somebody, and no matter how hard they had to just violate protocols and do all that stuff, man. Did you ever, did they, in your studies, did you ever feel that they had that, any more stuff like that with other teens or stuff like that?
This has happened to other teenagers. So, most people have heard of, the Central Park Five as an example, though it's certainly not limited to their case. Many other cases also. Yeah. So while adults have been coerced into false confessions, particularly vulnerable populations are youth and people with mental health illnesses, for sure.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
So Jeff, 16 years old, this all goes down. You turn 17, the case goes. What did they convict you of?
Yeah, sure. I just want to add a little murder and rape, but I just
Okay.
want to add one other part of the trial, if I can, just to
Go,
round out that picture.
go ahead, Jeff.
So my interrogation was not videotaped. It was no audio tape. It was no signed confession. It was just the cop's word for it. And when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their story. My lawyer would not allow me to testify. Now, when you're defending a case where there's a confession, you have to answer that confession. You got to explain that confession. You have to disprove that confession, bring it all together in your closing argument, except that he didn't do any of that. And the end result of it all was that I was wrongfully convicted of murder and rape. I had been charged as an adult, and I was therefore sentenced as an adult. I was given a 15 to life sentence, despite the judge saying to me, because I begged him to overturn the verdict, I referenced the DNA, and he said to me on the record, maybe you are innocent. Now, what would you think would naturally flow from that? That means as the judge, you step up for justice and you overturn the conviction, which he could have done by reversing any number of rulings he made against me in the course of the trial. But instead of doing that, he took the easy way out, which was to give me the 15 to life sentence, which I was sent to a men's maximum security prison to serve.
Hold on, Jeff. Greg, are you hearing this, Greg? Because Greg, the VP of our company, he is also works in forensics, and so I told him that this was going to really be mind blowing. Greg says, wow, hopefully the system has gotten better. Well, I think Jeff Deskovic, our guest on Impacting Life 24/7, is going to show when we go to the second half of this and discuss the work he's doing. He's going to show that there's still some work to do in our justice system, but obviously because Jeff is getting people 11 total so far, I believe, right, Jeff, that you've helped overturn wrongful convictions. One of the things that really stands out to me is that I have done prison work. Okay, I know people don't believe that, but I have spoken prisons. I've actually done church in prisons. I've done it here. I've done it in Newport. I've done it in Vanceboro, and it is intimidating when you're just a guest. You know what I mean? You know that the guards are watching and the people are shackled, and it's still intimidating at 40-something years old when I was doing this. But Jeff, you got a sentence of 15 years to life, and you immediately got remanded to the custody of the prison system. Tell us, brother, what was that like?
It was a very frightening experience. I remember how large the prison wall loomed, how menacing the barbed wire appeared. I remember as I walked down the cell galleries and I saw, fully formed adults whose arms were as big as my legs. The amount of violence that went on in prison, 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings, and plenty of violence that didn't involve weapons, and there was gang activity. So taken cumulatively, there was a general atmosphere of violence and adrenaline that permeated the air. I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. I had a bullseye on my back because I was wrongfully convicted of a rape with a murder, which there's a vigilante mentality towards people who are convicted of sex offenses. So in the course of my 16 years, I got beat up 6 or 7 times, based on that. But then because I attempted to fight back the best that I could, even in that position, I was subjected to sanctions that somebody would get for fighting. I was kept in the cell 23 hours a day out of 24. They would send me less food. Sometimes the food would be 3 or 4 days old. And recreation, I'll put that in quotes, was in a small cage area by yourself with maybe a pull-up bar in it if you were lucky. I could not purchase items at the store when I was on that status, and I was unable to use the phone as well. The guards themselves were abusive verbally. And sometimes there were times in the course of my incarceration that other prisoners would come up to me and would tell me that some of the officers were telling other prisoners what I was in prison for, hoping that would put the battery in their back to try to assault me. I could have been stabbed. I could have been cut. I could have been killed. Anything
So you didn't
could have
get
happened there.
Mike, you are familiar with ADSEG, right? You know, administrative
Right.
segregation. You didn't get an opportunity to go to ADSEG, huh, Jeff?
Well, no, I mean, no, I did not. Well, I did not. But what I want to say is they asked me, did I want to go to protective custody? And
Right.
being naive, I said to them, well, what's that? And they said, well, that's what you're in fear of your life. Look, we really can't protect you, but if you're in fear of your life, you know, you could be kept in a cell 23 hours a day out of 24. You come out for recreation 1 hour a day by yourself to use the TV, use the phone, use the shower. And I couldn't deal with being in those cells. I wasn't about to agree to terms and conditions that was going to make this whole horrific experience even worse. And so at 17, this is my line of reasoning, CL. I thought to myself, you know, well, I can't believe I'm here, right? And I'm not making it worse by going to protective custody. I'm going to general population. And if somebody kills me, well, I guess I don't need to worry about doing the rest of this life sentence anymore now, do I? And so with that, I declined their protective custody and I went to general population where I stayed my whole 16 years.
Man, he manned up.
Which prison were you in, Jeff?
Yeah, I was primarily in Elmira Correctional Facility, which is in Chemung County. I did 13 and a half years there, but that was broken up, meaning that I was there for 4 or 5 years. Then they transferred me to a different prison, Eastern. Then they moved me back to Elmira for about 10 months. Then I went to Shawangunk for 1.5 years. And then I went back to Elmira for a decade. And then I was transferred to Sing Sing, where I spent what turned out to be the last 28 days of my incarceration.
So before we go to our break, ladies and gentlemen, I got with us on our show, man. I'm just absolutely I'm dumbfounded. I've got my friend and guest, the founder of the Deskovic Foundation, Jeff Deskovic, Esquire. He's got a master's degree in, what was your master's in, Jeff?
Criminal justice. Criminal
justice, and go figure. He would create a foundation to help people who have been wrongly convicted. I got his website here. It's deskovicfoundation.org. And it kind of is spelled like it sounds because I've been working on his name all day. Deskovic, just like that. Deskovicfoundation.org. And you can connect there if you'd like to donate to this foundation for them to continue their work to help wrongfully convicted inmates. Man, please go there right now and connect with Jeff on Facebook and Instagram and social media. I really believe in the work that he's doing. We've had somebody on here before from the what is that called, Greg? The Innocence Project. I think we had a guest on here before from that, and it really stirred my heart. She wasn't a violator. She hadn't been convicted, but their mission was similar to yours, Jeff. And listen, when you talk about boots on the ground that are looking at the granular workings of our justice system, Mike, there's still work to do, isn't there?
Definitely. I just keep going back to how they had to try to, wrongly convict this guy to get a conviction, no matter who it was. They were trying to put the screws to any guy they could probably get. So, Jeff, do you ever think if it wasn't you in that situation that they would have got somebody else? I mean, it seems like one thing after the other, man.
What year?
100%. Yes.
What year was this, Jeff?
Yeah, I was arrested in 1990.
1990. So so DNA was around. Was it as?
Yes.
Was it as? I mean, obviously it's advanced even from then, but they did not illuminate the fact that your DNA was not at the scene.
Right, meaning my attorney did not play it up. The prosecutor called the DNA experts to testify that, but he put that on the front end of his case. And then he had brought the cops in after that to talk about this coerced confession to try to make the jury, forget about that, and then my lawyer didn't do his job and really utilize the DNA like he should have. So, yeah, you're right.
That's something. Well, after our break, ladies and gentlemen, our 9 o'clock break with it's 8:30 now. We're running the show a little early tonight because we wanted to get Jeff on. He's highly in demand. He's highly sought after. He's a nationally known public figure, and he's the founder of the Deskovic Foundation because he is helping people actually obtain justice. We'll talk more about what his work is doing, how he reintegrated himself back into society. Mike, that's got to be a huge struggle. So we'll kind of peel that onion back and then get into the work that Jeff is doing right after our commercial break with our sponsors. Impacting Life 24/7 is an event that can be experienced locally and around the world because of our platinum sponsors. Mr. Mike Black from New Bern, North Carolina. Mike helps men throughout Eastern Carolina lead a faith-filled life. He is a compassionate leader in his church and is a devoted husband and father. Another platinum sponsor, Dr. Nate Dunlap Jr. He is the executive director of the PRF Institute. He is the author of What's Next? Preparing for Eternity and Don't Leave Me Like This, Inspiration to Leave a Legacy. As a 501c3 nonprofit organization, the PRF Institute is blessed to be the premier stewardship-based teaching ministry that truly responds to the needs of families and communities around the country. Find Dr. Dunlap and his amazing team at prfinstitute.org. Another platinum sponsor, poet Katrina McCain. She is the author of Because She Decided to Love. This is a collection of poetry and prose about love and its impact on every relationship. This raw and uncut poetry book addresses the themes of how we experience love through loss, hurt, pain, grief, and passion. Because She Decided to Love takes readers through a journey from the sweetest to the most bitter emotions that love evokes. Get your copy of her book today at poetkatrina.mccain.com. Another platinum sponsor, Dr. Skip Mondragon, MD. He is a 26-year Army veteran, National Veterans Wrestling Champion, and a dynamic speaker. He is also the author of Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps. Lessons learned from an amateur wrestler's fight to triumph over depression. Contact Dr. Skip Mondragon II at wrestlingisnotforwimps.com. Another platinum sponsor, the Underdog Ninja Foundation. This foundation was founded in 2020 by Javi and Jessica Madrigal. This husband and wife team have been battling and overcoming heart disease for over 18 years. Their personal story and experiences have led to follow the calling of empowering, educating, and supporting those fighting heart disease. Contact this amazing team at underdogninja.org. If you'd like to know more about Impacting Life 24/7 or to become a sponsor, all that you have to do is do something very simple. Go to clkingspeaker.com. That's right. Go to clkingspeaker.com, Impacting Life 24/7. We really thank our sponsors from around the world that are helping us. And tonight has really been just a very eye-opening experience. I just can't tell you the weight of what I feel from our guest, the founder of the Deskovic Foundation, attorney Jeff Deskovic, Esquire. He is really something relative to, man, you don't just talk the talk, but he's walked he has walked the walk. And we want to definitely cover, we've covered so much in such a short amount of time, but there's so much more to cover. And Jeff was convicted wrongfully of a rape and murder back in 1990, and he spent 16 years in prison knowing that he was innocent. And so Mike, I know we're going to kind of piggyback off of our questions here, but let me just set it up with the first part of the question is, exoneration. How did you get exonerated? Let's discuss that real quick, Jeff.
Sure. So I lost 7 appeals. And when your appeals are exhausted, the only way back into court is if you find some previously unknown evidence of innocence. So because I didn't have any money to hire an attorney or an investigator to find any evidence, hence the letter writing campaign. So I did that for about 4 years. Then I went to the parole board, and because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got turned down for parole there. Ultimately, I was exonerated because the Innocence Project agreed to represent me. So getting their representation was the first key. Second key was this former Westchester District Attorney, Janine Pirro, who was not the DA when I was convicted, but who took office prior to my first appeal being decided. So she kept the ball rolling against me. She blocked me from getting DNA testing several times. So she left office, and her successor allowed me to have the testing. And the third thing was, we got lucky that when we put the DNA evidence, which already didn't match me, into the data bank, it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was only in that data bank because, left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed a second victim 3.5 years later, who was a school teacher and who had 2 children. So on September 20th,
What?
2006, the conviction was overturned. I was released. I reported back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges against me were dismissed on actual innocence grounds.
You're on mute.
And he was arrested. Oh, yeah. So on September 22nd, 2006, my conviction was overturned. I was released, and I went back to court November 2nd, 2006, at which point all the charges were dismissed against me on actual innocence grounds.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, this guy had to murder again to be caught, and they caught this guy. Can you tell me real quick, was there any kind of prison ministries that were there? Because I'm just thinking about, can't even imagine how you must have felt there, and writing the letters and doing all your appeals. At what point did someone encourage you to, keep going? Because I know you weren't all by yourself. You said you went to the general pop like a man. I probably would have took been
I would have been 23 in lockdown, baby.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, hey, matter of fact, you got my respect, because you were like, nah, put me in the general pop. And I'm like, wow. So mad respect on that. But just share real quick, like what encouraged you to keep going, and who was there for you?
Sure. So definitely belief in God was a major factor. Second thing was, in my mind, I wasn't doing a 15 to life sentence. I thought I was just doing a year or two till the next appeal would be decided, which I was sure that I would win. I used to go to the law library to learn the law, and that gave a sense of empowerment. I used to collect articles about other people who were exonerated, and that would serve as inspiration to me. There was another wrongfully convicted prisoner there named Frank Sterling, who we used to get together once every 6 weeks, and we would keep each other going morale-wise, and we would brainstorm about what the next move is. And by the way, Frank was exonerated after 18 years through DNA, a couple of years after me. So it wasn't just that, he claimed to be innocent and I naively believed him. No, actually, we both really were innocent, and we both proved that in court. So he was a factor. Another factor was, I placed the ad, in a newspaper, just looking for a pen pal, desperate for outside contact, and also hoping that that person could become a champion for me and connect me to the substantive legal assistance that I needed. And this was a stranger, and I was openly asking him in the last several years of my incarceration, should I quit? Should I just give up, man? Maybe I should just commit suicide. And he used to encourage me to keep going. So that was a major factor as well. Want to mention too, my grandmother passed while I was wrongfully incarcerated. The overwhelming majority of my extended family never came to see me while I was inside. Last 5-6 years, my mother would have been my only consistent visitor. Last 5-6 years, lucky if I saw her once every 6 months. So in a lot of ways, though not literally, in many ways, I did the time myself as far as outside contact. It was a minimal thing, and that made everything a lot harder, honestly.
Let me just pause here, man. I'm just
man, that's
I don't even. I tell you what, man, you know what I'm feeling, Mike. You know what I'm feeling, brother.
Oh, definitely, man. Yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. Like, wow.
We talked about this today. We talked about this last night in a speech I did, Jeff, talking about us picking up the mantle of being a spiritual medic. And, I'm not trying to super spiritualize this, but we're men of faith. And man, to know somebody's wounded on the battlefield and just leave them there, prison is its own world,
Yes.
The life that you lived there, man, it just, was it shock? I mean, it had to be absolute overwhelming shock, right?
100%. Yeah. Listen, maybe half the time I was there, I couldn't actually believe what my senses were telling me, that I'm actually there wrongfully convicted in prison. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And the thing about it is that it's like, I know when, okay, I'm not totally innocent of anything. I mean, we've all done our dirt, me and Black, back in the days. But what I'm telling you is that when I know that I'm good and I've done right, Man, I'm screaming on the top of the mountains, hey, that was not me. And I just can't imagine maybe some of the feelings. I know you had encouragement and we focus on encouragement and positivity, but I just can't imagine there was times of emptiness like you said, man, I know I didn't do this and yet there's nobody listening.
Yeah, 100%. No, I did feel that way. The world felt very, very cold and apathetic. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And Jeff, I can't think about, just hearing your story. It just angers me, the injustice that was done to you. But the prosecutors, did anybody, when you got overturned, when it got overturned, did anybody held accountable? I mean,
The short
that's a
answer
silly
is
question. I mean, I'm
no,
probably,
no, it's not a silly. It's a good one. It's a good question. I guess the short answer is no. If I was to put just a little bit more color to it, I mean, I did bring a civil rights lawsuit. I did seek compensation in state court, and ultimately I did triumph there. I was compensated. But the
okay.
main point, though, is that none of the people that was the state and the municipalities that they worked for that paid it. None of the people actually involved in it ever paid a penny. Nobody suffered any consequences civilly. Nobody was charged criminally. Nobody was fired. In fact, the lieutenant that oversaw everything had become the police chief in part based on my case. And they stayed with him as the police chief for the next 6 to 7 years, even after I emerged. I did get an apology from the judge and the prosecutor in the courtroom when I was exonerated, but those were not their counterparts that were originally involved in the case. Nobody that ever had a hand in what happened to me ever apologized to me.
So
Man, what a,
when you were exonerated, just so our audience understands, it's as if your record is clean.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, in New York it does. Yeah, that's been an issue in some of the other states. In fact, that's one of the laws that we helped pass in Pennsylvania. But we'll get into that after. But a short general answer would be yes.
Wow. And here's where we see, and we're gonna kind of go this way. We might have to extend a few minutes, guys, because this man's story is just it. This is what Impacting Life 24/7 is about, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking with our staff. We were having a brainstorming session, and we said, this very well may be the platform where people can come to get a smorgasbord, if you will, of assets that can help them in their life. Tonight we're talking about, hey man, wrongful convictions. And here's a point of contact for you guys. My friend, Jeff Deskovic, Esquire, and you can find him very simply. Just go to deskovicfoundation.org. And hearing his story about spending 60, Mike, I'll just be honest with you. Let's just keep it real, like we said.
right.
I would have been like, because I've been in prison, but I've been speaking in them.
Right.
I would have been like, yo, I'm not being in Gen Pop because they already done spreaded the word that I done murdered some girl and raped her. And, even though these guys is in here for something, they look at me as, you know what I mean? They're going to treat me worse. And
Right.
so I'm going to the 23 lockdown. I'm going to the cage for an hour for recreation. But Jeff, there was something inside of you that man, the fortitude to say I did not commit this crime and I'm not going to hide. Man, that's powerful, man. Are you feeling that, Mike?
Big time, man. Big time. And I think even just what's more impressive is to be 17, 18 years old and say that. And it got to be some scary characters up in prison, man. Like you said, you've seen people getting stabbed, beat up. I mean, prison ain't like in the movies. And real life, I imagine it's so terrifying, especially as a young kid, man. I mean, you can be tough if you want to, but the things you saw, man, wow.
So you're 16, 17, you go in prison, you get exonerated, your record is clean. But how did you reintegrate? Because let's get on down the road. How did you reintegrate back into society, man? A lot had changed since when you went in back in 1990.
Right.
Yeah, a lot had changed. Yes. So we'll start on the technological side. So GPS, cell phones, internet had not been created. Culture was completely different. Cities and towns no longer looked the same. The people that I knew that once lived there long since moved away. So cumulatively, it felt like I was in a parallel world, an area that I didn't belong in. there was a psychological after effects of being wrongfully incarcerated. Common symptoms: PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety, related symptoms such as feeling having been frozen in time, processing things at a slower speed. There was the stigma. Yeah, you were in prison 16 years wrongfully. Yes, but you were there for 16 years. How much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So that has been a hindrance in terms of personal relationships. I was released with nothing. It took me 5 years before I was compensated, and I didn't get any help from the state at all during that time period. So I was always passed over for gainful employment. I was making money doing speaking engagements, but that wasn't a consistent form of income. I caught on as a weekly columnist in a newspaper, but they only wanted one article a week. So consequently, it was a struggle for me to survive financially. And as a result of that, I lacked stability of housing. I bounced around from place to place. And I was, at one point, I was 2 weeks away from being in a homeless shelter. Now, I had particular challenges because the years that I was wrongfully in prison, from age 17 to 32, I had never before lived on my own. I hadn't had a driver's license, never went shopping, never had to write a check, never balanced the budget. So all those things came at me at the same, and man, was it lonely, So all those things together made it very difficult. But simultaneous, good, you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, simultaneous to that, when I was released at that press conference, I spoke off the cuff 2.5 hours, everything I ever wanted to say in 16 years, but could never get anyone to hear me, CL. It all came out. And it was at that moment that the light bulb went off. And I said, I could be part of the innocence movement without necessarily being a lawyer. So while I'm having all that hardship, I simultaneously became an advocate. I was speaking, I was writing, I was doing media interviews, I was meeting with elected officials. I got scholarship from Mercy College. I finished the bachelor's because I had completed GED associates in a year towards the BA. At the time, funding was cut. So I got the bachelor's, I got the master's degree. I wrote a thesis on wrongful conviction causes and reform. And after 5 years, I finally was financially compensated. And I decided, I want to go from just the policy work and the education, but nibbling on the edges at freeing people. My name is used sometimes in media advisories to get attention for other cases, and go into court for the visual impact of the judge seeing me. Let me pay attention more to this one. And Deskovic's here, must be something to that. And pack in the courtroom and writing articles about cases. But I wanted to be more directly involved in freeing people. So hence I took $1.5 million from what I got, and I started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. And we have been able to get 11 wrongfully convicted people home. And we did pass the 3 laws: DNA database expansion, videotape interrogation, identification reform, as part of the coalition group It Could Happen to You, which the foundation is part of. I'm on the advisory board. We passed independent oversight for the prosecutors. We did that. We passed that 3 times.
Hold on. You said independent oversight for the prosecutor. So someone,
yes,
another set of eyes that's independent from that case, right?
Exactly right. Yes. Discovery reform. So now information has to be shared automatically early in the process between the defense and prosecutors. No more waiting to the eve of a hearing or a trial before you're going to turn over limited evidence. No, everything's got to be done automatically right away. And anything past a month requires a court order for extra time for them to turn it over. So we passed that. And then based off of that success, that blueprint of building a statewide coalition and overcoming the mighty DA's Association in New York, we opened chapters in Pennsylvania and in California, where I'm an active member of all 3 of those chapters, and we passed the law in PA. Before, imagine being in this situation, CL. What if you were exonerated in court, but when you go for a job, you still have a record. Your record hasn't been expunged. The very charges you've been exonerated of in court. So we passed that law in Pennsylvania. So now we're working on passing compensation in Pennsylvania. If you've been exonerated, there is no mechanism for people to be compensated in Pennsylvania. So we're building support for that. And we need the independent oversight for prosecutors in PA, working on that in California, independent oversight. But we see a chance to get rid of the death penalty because of the obvious risk of executing someone innocent and a host of other objections. So that's what we're working on policy-wise. We have 10 active cases, but at some point, it became not enough for me to sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to be able to sit at the table. I wanted to be able to represent some of the clients. I wanted to make some of the arguments, hence a foray into law school. And as we, I am an attorney. I am an attorney now.
Right, right. Jeff, man, you did a great job doing that too. You made it easy on me and Mike because that was just great rapid fire right there. Listen, here's what stands out to me about this is that you notice he threw out that number a million and some change to start the foundation. The thing that I like, and I think Jeff and I talked about this offline when I first met him, I wanted to ensure that he was compensated. The part that troubles me is that he had to fight so hard to get compensated. It's almost like, we say, hey, okay, yeah, we were wrong. God bless you. Good luck. Go find a box to live in. That bothers me. The gentleman, I think you and I talked about him, Jeff, he's in North Carolina. I think he did 40 years wrongfully convicted.
You're talking about, Ronald Long. Yeah.
Yeah, Ronnie Long, man. I'm gonna have him on the show one day when I can get him. He's pretty in demand.
I can help you with that. You want him? I could help. I could connect you. I'm happy to connect you, plug you in. Of course I would.
Work that out for us, Jeff. Okay, because I reached out
100%.
to his girlfriend, but he's been, imagine him, 40 years. He didn't even know there was such thing as a computer almost. You know what I mean?
Right. I hear you. Yeah, it's true. Technology passes you by. And this is kind of like, I want to just mention this, and this ties into what we're talking about. People who study the impact of wrongful imprisonment, that they say the closest thing it's almost like a soldier. It's like a soldier returning back from a battlefield that has to reintegrate and readjust to civilian life.
So you have, how many cases have you guys had overturned?
Yeah, so we've been able to free 11 people. So out of those 11, let me break that down real quick. So we're getting into the numbers, right? So three of those were exonerations. Mm-hmm. Another one, the conviction was overturned after 24 years. He's out on bail, but the prosecutor's retrying the case. Okay, so and in that case, that's the Andrew Krivak case. The same polygraphist that coerced the false confession out of me did the same thing to Andy. So that's an exoneration in progress, right? So hence using the word free. Another case was a 5-way collaboration in Pennsylvania, which once we helped get enough evidence together, it was on the eve of a hearing. The defendant had been in for 21 years. He had gotten out originally after 16 and a half. A higher court reinstated conviction. He went back to prison to resume a life without parole sentence. And 5 years later, finally enough evidence on the eve of the hearing, the Pennsylvania Attorney General said, you want to keep fighting this, you can. We're going to keep appealing, so this could take another 2-3 years if you even win. Or if you want to, you could go home tomorrow, just take this deal, and in order to regain his freedom and spend some time with his mother, who had passed not that long after that, our client took the deal. And another one was a compassionate release, where his conviction's being reviewed now by the conviction review unit in Suffolk County. But he's got some really debilitating illnesses, but the innocence aspect of it factored into the compassionate release. And in the other 5 situations, normally if someone goes to the parole board, if you maintain your innocence, if you don't express remorse, you don't take responsibility, they turn you down for parole. So notwithstanding that general dynamic, we have been able to persuade the parole board in 5 separate occasions to release our clients while they stood on their innocence. The goal is still exoneration, but it's much better to wait for the slow wheels of justice to turn while you're outside, albeit on parole, rather than behind the wall. So that's the breakdown of the 11 people.
Boy, you talking the truth there, man, because it seems like doesn't it seem like it, you and I know about the federal government, Mike. It seems like everything just goes to a screeching halt. It's better to be waiting on the outside and let the slow wheels of justice turn, like you said, than to be getting 3 hots in a cot inside the prison walls. One thing that I am amazed with, Jeff, is your heart. You could have taken that money and done whatever you wanted to do in life because you deserve it. There would be no questions asked. You could have taken your time and your energy and put it into some form of entertainment or some sort of recreation. You deserve it. They wrongfully convicted you. But instead, you have decided to pour your life work into helping others that went down the same path you did. Why did they do that, Jeff? Do you got any idea? Not why you're doing it now, but why were they so bent on pinning this thing on you? Do you got any idea? You got any thoughts on that?
I do. It's kind of like what Mike said. They just wanted to have the perception that they solved the case. So that I just happen to be the easy mark. I happen to be the patsy in this situation. I mean, was not a good faith error. The bottom drops out of that argument when you consider that the DNA didn't match me. They kept going with the case. They did the fraud by the medical examiner. The police interviewed 17 witnesses who knew the victim in one capacity or another. They all told the police she had no boyfriend. There was no consensual sex. The cops purposely did not document any of those witness interviews. So none of that was turned over to the defense at the time of the trial. This medical examiner who did the fraud had been complained of in neighboring counties by law enforcement because he moonlighted at whichever way the money flowed was where he was giving his testimony. So they never turned that over to the defense. We could have used that to impeach him, to challenge his credibility, but they never turned any of that over. So I think that they just wanted it to seem like they solved it. The whole city of Peekskill practically ground to a halt. I mean, parents were driving their kids to school, picking them up after school, bringing them straight home. There were town hall meetings held periodically on safety tips and progress on the case. And they had the state police breathing down their neck because the victim's family went to the state police and said, look, we don't think they have the experience, and we don't think they know what they're doing. Could you please take this investigation over? But the state police didn't take it over, but they let the Peekskill police know that they were watching and that the family had approached them. So I think all those aspects of pressure all came together and culminated into the result of what happened.
You know, the gentleman that actually took this girl's life that you got accused of and convicted of, it took 3 years, but he resurfaced, right? He killed someone else. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, 3.5 years later. That is correct. Yes.
3.5 years later. And, you know, one thing that I can say, and we're almost out of time, is, Mike, I would be bitter. I'm human. I'm a human being. I'd be so bitter. You might not be, Mike, because you're more mild, but.
Well, I just think that, and again, Jeff, I know we just met, but just hearing your story, I just keep going back to the thought of just anger at the injustice. But yet I'm so in awe of you that you took it and flipped it. And in your own way, even though you're never going to get those that did this, get the accountability, you're making it accountable for the future people. So, man, bravo, man. Great work. I mean, wow. But I still feel upset, that justice
Sure.
is
So
not for those people that wronged you. You know what I'm saying? And
No,
like
I
you said,
do.
they could have wronged somebody else just as easy,
Right. And let me say this. Let me reply this way. So my first week home, I was angry and bitter, and I realized, look, this is destroying me. I got to let this go. And look, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. I've lost so much already. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? If I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I would be impacting the people that did this to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. And that's my release. It's meaningful, it's healing, it's cathartic. This is my mission in the world. That's how I make sense of everything that happened to me. And so with that, I have that inner resignation. I have that, inner peace. And so I didn't allow this traumatic event really to destroy me. I kind of elevated above that. But at the same time, my head's the right size, feet firmly on the ground. I'm just a tool in the struggle. So just want to make those points. And if someone's listening now,
Jeff, I'm just telling you, brother, we got to keep Jeff close by, especially if we get a speeding ticket down here, right? We got to call Jeff. Hey, y'all know, all I got to do when the officer pulls up and say, do you know Jeff Deskovic? And they're going to be like, oh, right this way, Mr. King, carry on. Because Jeff, seriously, all kidding aside, my friend, the thing that I really love about how we have kind of put this together is your mentality. See, you can have the right to be angry and bitter, but that doesn't make it righteous. And really, though mankind had you in bars and in prison, you were free. You were free
Right.
in your mind. And so then when mankind freed you physically, you didn't allow yourself to be imprisoned with the mentality of you were done wrong. Jeff, you truly have tapped into something far beyond anything that I've heard. You know, when I say I'm in awe, I truly am in awe of what you have done. And I want to say to you on behalf of Impacting Life 24/7, you have inspired us. You've inspired all of us to realize that, man, even when you're done wrong, keep standing straight up. Keep pushing for right. That doesn't mean just because you were done wrong, you have to roll over, because you kept pushing for right, but you did it the right way, Jeff. And I would like for you to take the next 35, 40 seconds and give a word of encouragement to our global audience as we close out the show. Go ahead, Jeff. The floor is yours.
Set goals, have a realistic plan. No reasons why you can't accomplish something, only reasons why it might be harder. Remember, the goal's the goal, the plan's not the goal. So be flexible, work real hard, never give up. When you're about to give up, that's the key moment. You might have had a breakthrough if you would have kept going. So keep going. And when you do come out the other side, reach back for similarly situated people and do something on the preventative side that's well beyond wrongful conviction. You can do that. Domestic abuse survivor, sexual assault victim, homeless, debilitating illness, racism, discrimination, everything else, big, small, it applies to that. Please check out more of my story on Amazon Prime. Conviction is a documentary short.
Oh yes, and I just again, we will have you back on, Jeff. Okay, we're gonna bring you back on to exhaustively deal with all more of the stuff that you're doing. I wanted to read the cases tonight. We'll read some of those and talk about the great way that you guys partnered with the system to get the system right. My friend Jeffrey Deskovic, you can find him at deskovicfoundation.org. And make a contribution. There's a donate button there to help Jeff and his team continue to help people who've been wrongly convicted. He knows what it's like. Like, that's what I said. He don't just talk the talk. Jeffrey Deskovic walks the walk. Jeff, listen, it's been a pleasure having you, brother. I'll send you another link. You're pretty flexible like me. You know us busy people. We always got to move the schedule around. We had to move our schedule around with Jeff a couple times, but I knew we were going to have him on. It was just having to get it lined up. We'll have you back on maybe in the fall, and just very, very educational, very, very inspirational. You have impacted some lives, brother. And when people download this podcast from all around the world, man, I hope that they're inspired, and I hope that they reach out to you, man, and say, hey, listen, I got this situation. Can you give me some hope and direction? Listening to your story, I got a lot of hope, brother.
Awesome. That makes it all worth it. Very meaningful. And thank you for sharing your platform, CL. Mike, it was a pleasure chatting with you too. And I didn't say this at the beginning. I should have. Listen, both of you, I appreciate freedom, perhaps more than a lot of people. I want to thank both of you for your service to our country.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you,
so
sir.
You heard it there from, we'll make him an honorary Marine, Jeff Deskovic from the Bronx, New York, Esquire. We really appreciate you, the Deskovic Foundation. Go there and connect with Jeff. Jeff, we'll be in touch, okay, my brother?
Absolutely, brother. Thank you.
All right. Well, God bless you, man.
Hey, Jeff. See ya.
Wow.
That was awesome, man. Wow, man. Hey,
man, I'm telling you what, Greg, that was inspirational, man.
That brother was tough, man. When he said, put me in Gen Pop.
Man, he said, man, I'm not guilty.
He said, I ain't going no lockdown. You better put me out with there's hardcore killers in there.
Oh, my goodness, Mike.
And, look, when you're in jail up in New York, Elmira, you ever watch a prison show in Elmira? That's one of the most dangerous prisons in America. I ain't even joking, dog. Elmira, Sing Sing.
Yes.
I was like,
and he's
what?
up in there mixing it up like, yo, you notice he said he was in about 6 or 7 skirmishes. I wanted him to know if that was 6 or 7 a day. You know what I'm saying?
Dude.
Because they try you in prison, bro.
And he was 17, 18 years old talking about, nah, I'm here.
Man up.
I can't even imagine, dude.
That just speaks to that man's character, though, bro.
They railroaded that guy.
They did.
So, I mean, really?
And what does that tell you guys? What does that tell you? That The justice system, though, Lady Liberty is blind with a set of balances in her hand. Sometimes human beings intervene and get it wrong.
But you talk about the 90s, you'd like to think that it's changed. I mean, I don't think it's changed that much. I can't really speak to it. But back in the 90s, I mean, like you said, before the internet, before all this recording, all this technology, DNA, all that, man.
Yeah, it's just like kind of a wink and a nod. Like that guy hopefully can connect with us that was in prison for 40 years, man. And it got it overturned. He maintained his innocence the whole time, and then they found out at the end. 40 years, brother. The man was like late 60s. He's late 60s now. When he went in there, people are showing him Facebook and internet and all. He don't even have, it's like coming to a foreign country after spending so much of your life in prison. And Jeff is right, Mike. Like, imagine, okay, here I am. I done 16, 20 years, and I'm exonerated. But then you want to have me over for dinner. You know that there's a stigma that carries no matter what you say.
Right. And like you said, him trying to find a job. What you been doing for the last 16 years?
Right.
I mean, how do you explain that? And you don't know basic stuff through no fault of your own. You don't know none of this technology. What could you do? What could he have done? And I feel like that. I'm so glad he got that money, and then he flipped it, because I'm telling you, they should have been held accountable, man. And he did say something about he went to civil court. Right. He won something, but he said it took 5 years. I mean, talk about the wheels turning slow. What did the man do for 5 years?
That's what I'm saying. You heard him. He said he was living in boxes and almost homeless and bouncing around.
Yeah, so if he was 16 years in prison and then he was struggling for 5 years, he really had like a 20-year sentence. Really?
He did, because he came back out and he had no support system. I mean, and that's the thing. We look at the whole system. And the system has some major areas that need repaired, man. Let's say we could talk about it from both perspectives, Mike. People that are guilty who do their time and get out, a lot of time has passed for them too, right? And they get injected back into this, light speed society, and they're lost. So, here's this guy who was innocent.
Right.
Wasn't even there, was playing wiffle ball, and gets coerced without his parents or anybody around, and then he's told, all right, you good, go back into society and figure it out. That's a flaw in our system, bro.
It really is. I mean, that really is.
Yeah, re-entry is
and I bet you if there was a statistic, he'd probably be like, 1 in a million that a success story after they come out. Irrespective of if they're guilty or innocent. The people that succeed after they get out is probably far more people that, like you used last night, the Jesus example, that have just been left behind.
Right.
And who's going to get them? Who's going to help them?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, wow, this dude got his master's in criminal justice. He's a lawyer. He's in the mix of helping people. And, I was thinking about that, some of second chance programs, you're right, Greg, but we need more of them, man. We need more programs that help people reinstitute and reconstitute their life. You know what I mean? Especially if you're wrongfully convicted, they took away something that can never be replaced. You can never replace that stuff. And, I'm thinking to myself, when I go overseas somewhere, I feel like I'm totally lost.
Right.
So when you do that to somebody who's been in prison, because that's a whole world unto itself, you inject them back in, man. Yeah. See, in New Bern, Greg Singleton does that, but I'm talking about nationwide. We still got a lot of holes in that area, and it needs to be more. It needs to be more dynamic. Just period. Because as you heard, why should somebody who was innocent have to be struggling and floundering around? The systems weren't there. Or they didn't tell him, right, Mike? They didn't know what to connect with.
I mean, if he got overturned, in my mind, that man should be handed the check the next day.
Check the next day.
Here you go, brother.
Yeah.
5 years.
And these
man's at the soup kitchen, and the boy that screwed him over got promoted. Did you catch that part?
To the police chief. The guy that did him wrong got promoted to the police chief.
And you know what? That doesn't surprise me. That's what's sad.
No, that's sad, man. Well, anyway, Mike, what a way to wrap up the week, man. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Greg. Thank you to all of our team, Danny and Katrina. We're excited about where Impacting Life 24/7 is going. And really listen to this show, man. Could you imagine, Mike, if somebody was out there who has a relative that is declaring their innocence, what hope we were able to provide for them tonight to connect with this foundation?
No doubt. Yep.
And you know, I imagine that there's some filtering that goes through, and there's some credentials, because you know there are people that are guilty that are claiming they're innocent. You know what I mean? Oh, I didn't do it, trying to get out. And so I'm sure that there's a very robust process in which they kind of analyze whether or not, because I know the Innocence Project, they don't take old evidence. It's got to be something new that you bring to the table.
Okay.
To prove that you're innocent.
The Innocence Project, is that like in every state, or is it just in some states?
Well, the lady that I had on, she's a lawyer, and she's here in North Carolina, I believe.
Okay, Innocence Project. Okay.
So, but they're looking to get more chapters throughout the country. Yeah.
Sure.
So anyway, that's it for us tonight, Mike. Thank you so much for being with us on Impact Life 24/7. Listen, if you'd like to become a sponsor and join me, Mike, and Katrina, and Danny, and Greg to push this mission forward, you see what our mission is? It's clear, isn't it, Mike?
Clear as a bell.
You leave this show full of impact. If you ever have a doubt of what you can do or how you can get resources, Impacting Life 24/7 is that resource. So if you like to become a sponsor and get your name attached to something that's a repository of impact like this, man, just go to clkingspeaker.com and become a sponsor. I'm a sponsor. I'm a sponsor of my own show. And Mr. Black there, the American flag, he a sponsor too. So we love our sponsors. We thank them. The equipment, the sound, the quality, the people that we have on the show. You see, people want to come on this show because of the quality and reach that it has. Now, Mike was I think, the first guest that I had, the first pseudo guest. And it was a train wreck, wasn't it, Mike? Wasn't it a train wreck, brother?
That was awesome, man. It really was
a train wreck.
But you know, to see how it's blossomed,
yeah,
and how we're, you know, very professional now, and it's just our game continues to grow with the help and support of others. So it's amazing. It's awesome,
and that's what the sponsors help do, man. Your funds help us keep expanding our technology, keep growing our base and our reach. I mean, continuing to work in schools and community centers throughout the country and locally here in North Carolina. So our sponsors on 3 levels help us dynamically. And so again, if you want to become a sponsor and have your name, if you're at the gold or platinum sponsor, your name is on our commercial every show for the life of your sponsorship. So that's cool. And Mike didn't do it so his name could be. Most of our sponsors didn't do it for their name. They really do believe in the cause. And so we bless you guys. And Mike, I hope that you have a great weekend, my friend.
You too, man. You have a good weekend.
All right, we'll do it again here on Impact Life 24/7 with CL King and my man, Mike Black. Have a good night.
Night, y'all.